Hi students, this is your yoga history and philosophy lecture, and this will be pretty short. The main purpose of this video lecture is just to introduce you to a little bit of yoga history, where it came from, and ultimately what yoga is before we begin our journey through this semester. So let's start with the basics. So first off, the word yoga is not an English word. It is a word in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the language of yoga, and a lot of people say that, oh, well, it's such an old language, no one speaks Sanskrit anymore. That's not true. There are people that do still speak Sanskrit, but more often you hear Hindi. Hindi is a language that is developed from Sanskrit, and they're very similar in a lot of ways, but they also have some differences. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. There are some spelling and pronunciation differences, but also a lot of similarities between Sanskrit and Hindi as a language. The word itself, yoga, means to yoke, to union or bring together. And commonly, especially in the West, you hear that you're bringing together body and mind. That's a real trendy thing these days. Body, mind, exercise formats are all over the place, and lots of exercise likes to claim its body and mind if you're mindfully doing the exercise. But really, yoga is more than that. You are more accurately bringing together body, mind, and spirit. So really, we're just acknowledging that there is something beyond the physical form, more than just your brain, more than just your physical body. You have some sort of soul or spirit, and bringing that into union with the physical form is important. Also, in yoga, you're really trying to yoke or to bring yourself to something greater than yourself. This could be a higher power, a god, many gods. It could be to the universe at large. It could just be to your greater community. You're acknowledging that you're not the only one here. And community is super important in yoga, and that is the challenge of our online class, because most of your community, the other students who are in this course with you, you don't ever get to meet and see in person. And so that's why we are utilizing the forum posts to give yourself a sense of the community, because we're all in this together, basically. Everyone's different. Everyone's going to have different challenges, but we ultimately need to be a community that supports each other in this yoga journey, so that you are connecting yourself to something larger than just yourself. And as you're doing this, hopefully you are discovering your true self. That's yourself at the deepest level. And you're figuring out what the place is of yourself in the larger world. That's basically what yoga is. Getting to know your true self and getting to know your place in the larger world. And that encompasses your body, your mind, and your spirit. So moving on, a little tiny bit of yoga history. We could go into this for a long time, but I'll just give you kind of the nuts and bolts of yoga history. So yoga is at least 5,000, but possibly 10,000 years old. When we start talking about things that are this old, it's hard to know exactly where something might fall, but we do know that we have texts that are 5,000 years old that are mentioning yoga, so it's at least that old. Yoga's roots are in India, and the first mention of yoga is in the Vedas. And this is an ancient religious text that is associated with the religion Hinduism. Now, that being said, don't think that yoga is now completely tied to Hinduism or that yoga is a religion. It's not. It does have these historical ties, but it's also, the components of yoga can very easily fit in with other religions or no religion at all. So don't be concerned that any religious beliefs you have or don't have are going to interfere with our yoga practice. If you start to be concerned, you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to me. But ultimately, this is not a religious practice that we're delving into. But I do want you to know that the roots of yoga are found in this religious text, the Vedas. And then the first mention, or the first really how-to yoga book. So yoga is mentioned in the Vedas, but it doesn't really go into what it is. The first time we get a text that is telling us how to yoga, basically, how to live in a yogic way, are Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So a sutra is a thread, and so in this collection of Yoga Sutras, or threads, there are these short statements that are telling you how to live in a yogic way. The Yoga Sutras aren't telling you how to do poses or any of the physical practice, but they're telling you about how to live yogically. And in a moment, when we talk about the limbs, I think that'll make a little more sense. If you continue on and take Yoga 2 at NC State, you will read Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and have class discussions around that. So I'll just throw that out there for anyone who's not graduating and might be around and available to take an in-person class in a future semester. So moving along, as I mentioned in our history block, when we talk a little bit more about the limbs, some of that will make more sense. So moving on over here to the 8 limbs of yoga. Yoga is an 8-limbed path to enlightenment. So what does that mean? It means there are 8 parts of yoga, and if you do all of these 8 parts, then eventually you will become enlightened. Now you won't become enlightened in a semester's worth of study of yoga, or possibly even a lifetime, but that is kind of what we're going towards, that your true self has really merged with something greater and you are enlightened. So these purple circles around here are our 8 limbs. We're going to start over here with limb number 1. Yama is the first part of yoga. So if you see here, this is in Sanskrit, the word yama written. So first you'll notice that Sanskrit does not use our same letter system that we use in English. You will not be responsible for learning how to write in Sanskrit. You will need to be familiar with some of our important words though. So as the first limb, yama is a collection of 5 rules or guidelines. You could think of them as ethical codes. They're sort of rules for living. How will you live to live in a yogic way? And yamas are usually dealing with how you deal with the external world, with others around you. And so over on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see the 5 yamas. Ahimsa means non-violence. So it's reminding you not to be violent towards others. Satya means truthfulness. Asteya means non-stealing. So you shouldn't steal or take things that don't belong to you. Brahmacharya means abstinence. And it doesn't just mean abstinence from sex. It means, but you will see that definition quite a lot. You'll see celibacy in a lot of places for brahmacharya. But really it just means going without all sorts of things that might just be sort of overabundance of pleasure. And it doesn't mean you can't ever have pleasure, but it means to find moderation so things aren't becoming an addiction or a distraction from getting to know your true self. And then aparigraha means non-attachment to physical things, to people, or all sorts of things. So we will delve a little more deeply into each of these 5 yamas throughout our practices. They will serve one at a time as intentions for our opening meditations. So don't worry too much about remembering all the yamas right now or what they mean. I'll talk a little bit more about them one-on-one. So up next, the second limb, niyama. So niyama, again, is a set of 5 ethical codes or guidelines. Niyamas are more internal, though. They are feelings that we want to cultivate or observe within ourself. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the 5 niyamas. Shaucha means purity, and that's purity of body and of thoughts. Santosha means contentment. Tapas literally means to burn, but as we delve more into the definition, an easier way to think of tapas is discipline, even a fiery discipline, but discipline seems a little simpler to explain than burn. So hold on to that for now, and we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Svadhyaya means self-study, and Ishvara Pranidhana means to surrender. And that's sort of surrendering a little bit of your own ego, a little bit of your own desire for the something greater. So far, the first 2 limbs of yoga, you'll notice, yama and niyama, are all ways to live. We haven't done any physical practice yet, but we're about to. So limb number 3, asana. You'll see here is the word asana written in Sanskrit, and literally asana means a comfortable, steady posture. But remember that word posture, or a lot of times you see it as poses. Asanas are the physical postures or poses, the ones that you see in photos everywhere on Instagram or wherever else you see photos. What you see people moving through things on their yoga mats, those are asanas. And really the point of asana in yoga is to prepare the body to be able to sit comfortably in meditation. So all the strength building, flexibility building, balance building postures that we do are to get our body into the best shape so that our body isn't preventing us from delving deeper into the mind and the true self. Limb number 4, pranayama, literally means life, breath control. So these are our breathing techniques. We'll learn several different breathing techniques throughout this class. They have different uses. Some are for relaxation, some are to increase breath capacity, others might be to energize or to cleanse the body. And this is another big physical part of yoga, and one where we'll spend a lot of time. But again, remember that it's only just one of those 8 parts. So first 4 limbs to review: yama, niyama, those rules. Asana are our postures. Pranayama are our breathing techniques. So moving into the second half of the 8 limbs, these get a little more confusing, so don't worry about holding on to all of them right now, but we are going to go through them really quickly. So limb number 5, pratyahara, is withdrawal of the senses, and this is done through meditation. So really this just means that you're not paying attention to what you're seeing or what you're hearing or what you're feeling at the moment. You're pulling your concentration inside yourself. Limb number 6, dharana, is inner concentration through meditation. So again, this is a way of meditation where everything you're paying attention to is within yourself. And you might question what makes this different than limb number 5. Don't worry too much about it now. That's getting into more advanced stuff. If you just remember the second half of the limbs are all about meditation, that's good for our purposes for right now. Limb number 7, dhyana, devotion to self. And this is again through meditation. And this is the word dhyana that you see the most often used as a translation of meditation itself. But really, any of these 3 limbs, 5, 6, or 7, you could use that word for meditation because they're just different ways of meditating and getting to turn your focus to your true inner self and away from your physical form, really. And then limb number 8, samadhi. Samadhi means enlightenment or pure self. And so this doesn't mean your pure self, what we think of in sort of an ego or narcissistic way, because it's not the self of you that goes and lives in this human physical world. It's your true spirit, soul, self at the deepest level. And you're not concerned with sort of the everyday things and problems that we have to be concerned with. Again, samadhi is not something you will get in our semester long of practice, but know that at its pure form, this is the ultimate goal of yoga, is to move beyond our bodily problems and world and live in the pure self world. So those are our 8 limbs. And just really briefly then, Hatha yoga. This is a style of yoga, and if you read the syllabus and course description, you know that it said that's what we do. We do Hatha yoga. And so Hatha is really the physical practice of yoga, and it's basically asana and pranayama, postures and breathing techniques. Ha means sun, ta means moon, and so we are bringing together sun and moon, or a bringing together of opposites for Hatha yoga. Now, in our class, we also will do meditation. We will also talk about the yamas and niyamas, but the bulk of the course is in the physical practice of yoga. This is a health and exercise course, so yes, we're going to do a lot of postures, a lot of breathing, and get into the physical part. But I want you to know about the rest of yoga as well, because it's important to layer that into the physical practice to reap the most benefits for yourself. And so then if you also take a look at our image here, last things in our lecture, you'll see this little symbol down here. This is the symbol of Om. Om you will see written O-M. You'll also see it written A-U-M. That's really just a reminder of how it's pronounced. The more correct spelling would be O-M, but again, in Sanskrit, it would be written just like you see here. They don't use our letter system. Om is the universal vibration that exists within all living things. It's said it's the very original sound. The first sound that was ever heard was Om, or if you put all the sounds of the world together at once, what you hear is Om. So it doesn't have a literal translation. When you hear people singing or chanting Om, they're not saying something. It's about finding that vibration within either yourself or a community if many people are chanting it. So in some of our practices, I will invite you to chant Om with me. Of course, you don't have to. You could just listen and feel that vibration from me, but I encourage you to give it a try at some point. And then lastly, this necklace here, this is a mala, M-A-L-A. So a mala has 108 beads on it, and it can be used as a meditation tool. Certainly it could be worn as jewelry as well, but really it's to help you in a meditation practice. If you're going to repeat something, maybe it's the sound of Om, maybe it's another mantra or word that's important to you, some sort of resolution. If you're going to repeat that 108 times, this mala will help you. If you hold it in your hand, you would just slide through bead by bead on your repetitions to know when you've gotten to 108. And I say 108 because that's a very important number in yoga practices. There are lots of reasons why the number 108 is important. I'll just give you the one I like to think of the most. There are 108 energy channels or nadis in the body, and it's said that they all converge in the heart. So all these energy channels of the body are coming into the heart. There's 108 of them. That's why it's important. There are a lot of other reasons why 108 is important in yoga philosophy. I'll just leave you with that one for today. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the others later on. So in some of our video practices, you might see me wearing a mala. Usually I wear it on my wrist if I'm doing an asana practice. It might be around my neck if I'm doing a meditation practice, or I've taken it off and I'm using it through my fingers for that. So I wanted to let you know, so in case you see that, in case you've been to yoga studios and you've seen them for sale, maybe you have a little understanding of what it is. We'll definitely talk more about it later as we move through the course. So that is a tiny bit of yoga history and philosophy for you. Feel free to come back to this lecture throughout the course if you want a little refresher. Also, if you just want to review these 8 limbs, remember that you can go to our course website and the 8 limbs are listed and defined for you there. So thanks for listening and enjoy your first yoga practice coming up next.